So here's a question that might be out of left field, but can anybody here recite the preamble to the U.S. Constitution? Can anybody do it without singing, "We the people"? That's how I learned it. Schoolhouse Rock. They knew the connection between music and memory, trying to teach kids in the 80s all these different concepts like conjunction, junction, what's your function? Or I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill. And so if you're not in my generation and maybe you're not even sure what I'm talking about, here's another example. How did you learn the alphabet? D, E, F, G, right? That's the way most English-speaking children, at least that I know about, learn the alphabet. Music and memory are really linked. But I want to backtrack a minute and say that if you've been coming here for a while, you might have been surprised by the lyrics of that hymn we just sang. It's a very traditional Christian hymn that you could hear in a mainline Protestant church anywhere in the country. And though Unitarian Universalism has Christian and Jewish heritage, we tend to have a more expansive view of what or who God might be. And the hymns that the worship team and I choose tend to reflect that. But this hymn was specifically chosen today for this service. Today's service and sermon come out of a conversation with Kelly Wilson, and I invited her to wave. Are you willing to wave? Yeah, there's Kelly. Yeah. Kelly won the bid in last year's auction to choose a favorite hymn and then have a conversation with me, and we would plan a worship service around that hymn. Thank you, Kelly, for supporting the church with your bid and for the good conversation. Kelly grew up in the Presbyterian Church, and hearing "Be Thou My Vision" reminds her of those days. She told me that this choice of favorite hymn is not so much about the lyrics, but the way the sound of the music stirred up memories for her. She remembers that the church of her childhood had a group of strong women. They were visible role models for her. She remembers that her childhood was not always easy, but being in church was and still is a source of comfort and a place to be refreshed for whatever was coming in the next week. As she remembers those days in the Presbyterian Church, Kelly says she thinks about herself as a child in the pew hearing that hymn and wonders how she appeared to the adults around her. What would grown-up Kelly think about the child Kelly if they met? She feels a tenderness toward that younger version of herself, knowing all that is ahead of her, both joy and grief and loss and celebration. She looks back with warmth and a heart that's ready to forgive her younger self for all the mistakes that she will make, and looks at her current self and realizes how much she's healed. It was interesting to me that Kelly and I began our conversation talking about music, and we ended up talking about forgiveness and healing. And even more fascinating was that when I asked all of you in the parish news and in our Facebook group to share stories about music and memory, many of those stories tended to be about forgiveness and healing. One person who would like to remain anonymous shared a story about when they were about 20 and with an abusive partner. They felt unable to leave the relationship, and music was their go-to for both escape and for a way to express and sit with their feelings. The particular song they listened to often was called "Scared" by the rock band 3 Days Grace. When they listen to it now, the song brings back feelings of hopelessness and hurt and fear, and along with those feelings, it brings back vivid sensory images of where they were when they put on the song. Outside a car on a freeway in the fall near Chicago, how the cold breeze felt at night, sometimes in hotel rooms where it's mostly dark except for one lamp. They wrote, "Sometimes I listen to it now just to reflect on how I've grown. If I were to encounter the same kind of situation today, or even a hint of it, I've healed enough to realize I don't have to accept that kind of treatment, and I wouldn't feel scared to go to the police. Not to mention that now I have people in my life that I could turn to for help and support. I didn't have that back then. It makes me realize that I have healed. I don't hate myself anymore or feel like I deserved to be treated the way I was by my ex. It gives me a reference to compare what love feels like by knowing it was not that pain. It also gives me some pride, being able to look back with that song and see where I am in life, pursuing an education to help others stuck in similar situations. I thought I was going to die trapped in that life, and I didn't. Another person wrote to me about a powerful experience they had about a decade ago or so when they were in their 50s. This person doesn't want to out their sister, and so I'll just be calling them M. So about 10 years ago or so, M was at work and went outside for a break and turned on the radio. While they were there, a song they had never heard came on. It was Dar Williams' song, When I Was a Boy. When I Was a Boy is sung by a woman, remembering how as a child she did all the things that boys were supposed to do. She rode her bike shirtless, she played in the dirt, she climbed trees. But at a certain point, she was told that those were not the things that girls did. The singer laments all that was lost because she was expected to do only girl things. M said that as they listened, they began to cry, thinking of their sister who had never fit neatly into the binary of girl and boy. Their sister who had been told by the nuns at their Catholic church that she looked like a man, when our writer and their father thought their sister looked beautiful. They remembered that the Little League coach asked their father if their sister could put her hair up in the baseball cap and play on the boys' Little League team so they could win. M remembered their sister having to wear a dress and be in the homecoming court and how uncomfortable she was. M cried and cried in the car that day. M decided to call their sister that night and shared about all the memories that the song had evoked, and through a long conversation, learned that their sister had thought that their best friend in high school had reciprocated her romantic feelings. But when she revealed her feelings, the best friend rejected her sister and never spoke to her again. M wrote to me, now she's in a church where being her true self is not allowed. I'm pretty sure if she had been born 30 years later, her whole life would have been different. Those memories, stirred by a single song, in M's case, led to an honest and revealing conversation with their sister, and it drew them closer. Another congregant wrote this, my mother's favorite piece of music was the Rachmaninoff Concerto No. 2 in C minor. She had a 78 record album of the piece that was played very often. My job was to run to the record player when the record finished, to turn it over or put on the next record. A couple of months ago, I was driving toward a meeting, happily listening to WILL, the classical music station out of Champaign, when the Rachmaninoff Concerto came on. When it hit that first spot where I usually change the record, I was transported back into my childhood on the south side of Chicago. WILL played the whole concerto that day, and I changed all the records for my mom. Naturally, I was in tears halfway through. I was late for the meeting because I sat outside in the car to finish listening. I was a mess when I finally got inside, and I'm not sure anyone really understood my explanation, but it was okay. They were kind, and I was fine. Music, as you all know, is powerful. But did you know that our brains have more space dedicated to music and rhythm than they do for language? Music, it can change our heart rates, it can change the rhythm of our breathing, it can actually change our brain waves. We may or may not be aware of those physical changes, but what we do notice is how many times music calls up memories and emotions. This remembering can help us be more self-aware, help us reflect on who we are and who we have been. Music is also used as a tool for healing. Music therapy is a growing field, and music therapists use music to calm people before surgery and to help them get moving afterward, to help Parkinson's patients move again, to help people with Alzheimer's remember, to help people with autism to communicate, help people who've had a stroke to speak fluently. Premature infants who are sung to gain weight faster and leave the ICU earlier. As I was talking with Charlie this week about the service, he shared some experiences of his own with music and healing. And he said when he was about 10, he and his mom visited his great aunt in a nursing home. They were in a common area and there was a piano, and because Charlie had a big recital coming up, his mom had him go to the piano and play his piece so that his great aunt and the other people in the reception area could hear and enjoy it. Charlie played his piece, and afterward, a woman who was a resident at the nursing home got up, moved to the piano, and began playing hymns. To Charlie, as a 10-year-old, that didn't seem like any big deal, but the staff at the nursing home were amazed. This woman had not been very responsive to the staff, and they hadn't known that she knew how to play the piano. As far as they knew, she had never played the piano since she moved in. More recently, Charlie has observed his mom's own experience as she recovers from a stroke and how music therapy is helping her to rewire her brain. But besides its role in healing our bodies and our brains, our music is also a powerful tool for spiritual practice and mindfulness. I'm thinking of singing bowls that reverberate into silence, about chanting during meditation and singing during ceremonies. The singing that we do here is on purpose. Especially if we're singing a simple repeated phrase, that can be a type of group meditation, and at the very least, we're breathing together. If you've ever performed in a choir or a band or an orchestra that has mastered a piece of music, you may well know that transcendent feeling that comes from breathing together, moving together, and making music. That is an act of connection and conspiring, literally breathing together, conspire. This same connection can happen for the audience too, at rock concerts or at the symphony or during a Broadway musical. This April, on the trip that I took with a couple of members of this congregation and other folks from Bloomington Normal to civil rights sites, we were reminded by some people who had participated in the civil rights movement how important music was to them, to lift their spirits, to keep them going in sync, to encourage them and make them feel motivated. Music, it moves us, it connects us, it heals us, it lifts us, changes us, it helps us deal with our emotions, and it reminds us of who we are and who we have been. And so we circle back to where we started, with a hymn whose tune calls to mind for at least one person in this room a childhood that wasn't always easy, a church with strong women, the experience of being comforted and refreshed by attending church. That hymn that Kelly chose shares a tune with another hymn in our hymnal, which is number 298. Called Wake Now My Senses, not yet. This one has lyrics, I just lost my place, sorry. This one has lyrics that were written by a UU minister and lyricist. And so I wonder what memories, if any, this hymn will evoke for you. I wonder what healing might come through this music, what new awareness of yourself might you find, and what connections may become apparent as we sing together.